Hi, Paul Sackis, Good News Planet here with Ted Santos. Is that right?
Yes, I am. Ted Santos, in the flesh.
And you've been Ted Santos for a day or two, but you look very young.
Thank you.
How are you feeling today?
I'm really well.
All right, good. So Ted and I met at a motivational speakers event in New York a couple weeks ago. Who was speaking there?
J.T. Fox.
Okay, J.T. Fox was the motivation, and he was great. I want to commend that man on his delivery, his speech, the thoughts that he had to share about life, and
Sure.
I was very impressed with him, to be frank with you.
So was I, and it sounds like he's figured something out in the world of speaking and how to get people to actually convert to customers. So I was impressed.
Yeah, he's a businessman.
He's a businessman.
Of all businessmen. You know, he has these events. You can go and attend those for free, and then he has some added value to the experience by going to events that he has specifically for the people that partake, and some conventions and so. So I'd like to commend him on that.
Sure, absolutely.
Have you gone to other events of his?
No, that was actually the first time I had ever heard of him.
So Ted, what would bring a man like you to an event like that?
Well, I do a lot of speaking. Most of my speaking is inside of organizations. So I work with clients. Quite a bit is working with CEOs one-on-one and their direct reports. And then I'll also work with the general population of the company. So I'll meet with people in groups. So I'm speaking. The group could be anywhere from 5 to 50 people. So I do a lot of speaking, and I'm looking to do more speaking to the general population. I've done a few of that, but I'd like to do that on a much larger scale.
And what are you speaking to them about?
I speak to people about, you could look at it one way is, how do you take advantage of adversity? And how do you, my philosophy is, if the CEO of the company isn't intentionally creating problems in his organization, you don't have a CEO.
Oh, I am listening, obviously, because I'm holding you back here. Okay. If you said something about problems, that word problem always kind of grabs my ears. I always look at the problems as opportunities, and I think you probably do too, because you just said the word problems. Did you say the word problems?
Well, problems, your job, as CEO, your job is to create problems, disruption, breakdowns, chaos, challenges, whatever word you want to say. But I think it's our relationship to problems that makes us want to avoid it.
Okay, all right. So you're working off of that thought, because people do call it disruptiveness and other ways. Problems always scares me. But it's a motivating word.
Well, most people, the way they look at a problem is, let's get rid of it. If I can just solve it or just ignore it, let's sweep it under the rug. Or if I can find, you're the guy who created the problem, you're the scapegoat. So if we get rid of him, the problem's gone. And that's our relationship to problems.
So it's actually, in this sense, in a business corporate sense, let's talk about it. I'm sure organizational sense in any organization, I guess if there is a problem, I mean, it's not necessarily that you have to fire that person right on the spot. It really might be the opportunity for that conversation to see why there is, let's call it, I'll use the word problem even though I don't like it, but I will use it, why there is a problem with that person, if that is what we all kind of come to realize, and then to discuss it with them and see, they might be on a different page. What do you find when someone then says, we've realized after conversations that, let's call it, you're the problem, and maybe that problem is the CEO, maybe that problem is the head of human resources, or maybe that problem is the executive director of the foundation. How does this all work out?
Well, so if we take a step back and we look at a guy like Steve Jobs, back in 1983, he presented to the world, technically it was the iPad, or he called it the notebook. And the board thought this guy was a problem. He was spending money on things and it wasn't working.
But Steve Jobs was a problem.
To the board, he was a problem. So they demoted him.
They demoted him?
That's a real fact? They demoted him from CEO and put him in charge of another division. And then he said, I'm leaving.
Oh, I didn't know this. Okay.
He wasn't fired. He was just demoted from CEO. At that time, he and John Scully were both CEOs. So when they demoted him, John Scully was left as CEO, And John Scully was the professional manager. You know, he knew how to run the company, and he could increase earnings and raise the stock price and lay people off and drive more computers into the marketplace. And he really ended up driving the company into the ground. In an interview with John Scully, they asked him, do you think Jobs had to come back or go out and mature a little? He said, no. The guy did everything that he said he wanted to do back in the early 80s. So it wasn't that Jobs was a problem. He had this vision that people didn't know how to interpret. So it was a problem in their mind because they couldn't fully understand it. Because if he was creating an iPod in 1983 and it failed then, but then it succeeded, 30 years later, it was never a problem. It was people's perspective of the situation that was really the problem.
I understand what you're saying. I'm living my life like that. Actually, not that I'm so brilliant, but I always said to me, I'm always ahead of my time. Look, we're doing good news broadcast, okay? And people have said to me, what? Who? There's enough good news? And I hate to tell them. I mean, the line normally is that I'm stressed out from so much good news. And so they said, really? I said, yeah, well, look around you. I'm in a room with 500 people, say, in this situation, I don't see anybody fighting anybody. I don't see any problems here.
Exactly.
I mean, I tell you, I could produce 50,000 shows in this one room with 500 people, right here, right now. Right. So do I have enough content? Is there enough good news going on? It's out there.
Absolutely. Sure. So if I take a few steps back even further, just think of it. When we were all 2 years old, learning to tie our shoe was a problem. At 10 years old, you tie your shoe. At 20 years old, if you're having a problem tying your shoe and you're a healthy person, most people are going to look at you like, something's wrong with this guy.
You got a problem.
Right? You got a problem, right? But at 2 years...
you got to buy loafers.
Right, exactly, right.
That's a solution to the problem.
Velcro, right?
Yeah, Velcro, all right.
Well, essentially what I'm saying is at 2 years old, tying your shoe wasn't the problem. It was just our perspective at 2. We didn't know how to do it.
This Ted's a smart guy.
It's not that tying your shoes is a problem, because at 10, you can do it with no problem.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of things that we see as a problem. Even people like Steve Jobs, the board thought he was a problem, and he really wasn't. I mean, he came back, and we look at Apple even today, while he's gone. So what I've seen is that problems aren't always the problems that we think they are. They often turn out to be a catalyst for extraordinary things. And I kind of learned that in a way. You talk about good news. I'll talk to you about some things that definitely would sound unfortunate, adversity, except what it did was give me a completely new perspective on life and how to view problems, not necessarily transform them into opportunities, because the opportunity was there. It was just you didn't see it. Right? That's a good way to say it. It was hidden. So, when I was 6 years old, but actually when I was 6 years old, my mother went to a New Year's Eve party at her mother's house, and it's over, I don't know what time, maybe 5 in the morning, and she drops her brother and his wife off, and she has myself and she has 3 children in the front seat. She normally doesn't put us in the front, but she let her brother and his wife sit in the back. She drops them off, drives home. 100 yards from home, I wake up and the car is wrapped around a tree.
Hey.
Yeah.
Sorry to hear.
Yeah. So I look at my brother, he would have been 4, and my sister, who was about almost 2. And, we've got blood. And I look over at my mother, and she's gone. So I'm just tall enough to look over the dashboard, and I watch my mother run home. She runs home, and within no time, my father and his cousin come out, take the children, and take us to the hospital, and we get all stitched up. So what, right? I learned that my mother had 2 severely broken legs. So I know I saw her. She didn't limp. She didn't crawl. There was nothing wrong with the way she ran, and she ran with broken legs. So now at 6 years old, I'm thinking, human beings must have something really special in them, and we just don't know how to get to it. And I'd read all these articles about women lifting the car off their children, and people going into burning houses, jumping in water with ice to save people. And I'm like, human beings have it. how do you get to it? So I'm fascinated with human beings. So at 9 years old, I'm literally researching human behavior. At 11, I start working out because I'm going to build a body that can do something extraordinary. And I go to high school, and every sport I break records because I'm training and competing to run with broken legs. So look at me, I'm 5'6", I weigh 143, I'm dunking basketballs. I'm the starting defensive nose guard on the football team, and I was really good. But it was the mentality of running with broken legs. So that's in it. That's, you could say that was some adversity that had huge fortune because it changed my view of the world.
Wow, that's powerful stuff.
Yeah. Well, the story doesn't end there. So at 21, I receive a phone call, and they tell me both my parents are dead. Now I'm the oldest. There are 4 children. I'm 21. My brother is 19, and my sisters are 12 and 16. I have to take my 19-year-old brother off to college. He had a football scholarship. And there's so much to get done. Like, your parents are gone. There's no gray area. And my life is now changed. I could have been the wounded deer or the bird with the broken wing and fallen apart, but my commitment was the emotional well-being of my siblings. So I took over the family. But there was so much to do that I had to depend on the 12 and 16-year-old sisters, and I asked them to do things they didn't know how to do. So I learned leadership in the fire. Like, I'm dropped in the fire and lead. And so I coached my sisters up to do things they didn't know how to do. I was able to delegate. I learned about leadership and chaos. And so when I say in problems, that's adversity. What I learned from that was completely transferable to my professional life. So when I ran companies that were in chaos, I always knew that I had seen much worse, more chaotic situations, and I survived that. So this situation, I'll get through it. And so it has been a huge catalyst. And the other thing you notice, like with my mother running with broken legs, if the problem's big enough, people are going to do things that are just completely out of the ordinary. My parents die, and my sisters are doing things that they just would have never done in the normal course of being 12 or 16. So what I learned from that is if you can create a problem big enough, so like a guy like Jobs says, we're going to make this iPod, that's something we don't know how to do, and we're going to have to develop all kinds of new skills and competencies, and we're going to have to market to, we have a completely new target market. We're not just selling these expensive computers. They're these little tiny things that can sell for $125 to a 13-year-old. Wasn't our target market before. So you learn a lot when the CEO creates a problem for the organization to solve. It really galvanizes, and people who were, you could say, maybe a problem, the problem serves as a catalyst to kind of draw out some of the untapped intellectual capital, some of the skills and competencies that may be lying dormant in your organization. So the problem is beautiful when you look at it from another perspective.
So now you professionally take this background that you lived through, and you go to a corporation. I always wonder, how do you, are you called in, or you call them? How does that work? I mean, companies are do you ever get called by the board who says, this business is sliding? We need some advice on how to move us forwards.
Sure, I've been people that I know who are attorneys will say, I have a client, they're having problems, they're in deep doo-doo, right? So can you help them? And you sit down and they tell you, well, our sales team is the biggest problem, and after you speak to them a few minutes, you find out it may be management and how they've structured the company. Even when a company's in trouble, training them to create a problem that will be a quantum leap or a breakthrough. So ultimately, I'm working with leaders to create disruptive strategies. and then create a corporate culture that will be able to execute those disruptive
Give us an example of one. You don't have to name the company unless you want to.
No. So there's a company that they make consumer goods, food, and they have been in one specific industry, and they make variations of the same consumable product. And I worked with, there were two CEOs, so the company's been around for a while, and they're third generation. And I worked with one CEO who never sold anything. His brother's the other CEO, who is a superstar. So I worked with this one CEO. The breakthrough was for him to bring revenue to the company and find an untapped market. So the untapped market for them was to not just make their own products, it was to make products for someone else.
Oh.
So they have all the equipment to do it. They may have to buy other things, but so they take someone who's a small company, scale them up, and now the company's able to drive marketing. But my client now says, well, we have back office, we have marketing, we have sales, we have all these, we have equipment, we have labor, we have plant. So this gentleman who never sold anything has now brought in the largest client in the company's history.
So what do you think it was with this CEO, the non-productive revenue generator? I'm sure he had other assets, or he
sure.
would, maybe he was the management guy over the teams and the inspiration, and the other guy was a good talker. A salesperson is a certain art. Everything is a certain characteristic. Somebody feels comfortable, selling, and somebody
Right.
might not feel comfortable. But maybe you found that happy medium for the new CEO, let's call him, that it wasn't really a hard sale, or it was like a soft sale in the same industry that he could just kind of like talk about, that he knows very, very well. What was it in that CEO's that made him now feel comfortable to bring in revenue?
So
what do you think?
I'm always working with mindset. So how do you see yourself? How do you see the marketplace? So however you see yourself can be an impediment. We were talking earlier about minefields. You have minefields in your own mind about what you can and cannot
We're
do.
our own worst enemies.
We are. So the quantum leap sometimes is getting...
I'll speak for myself.
Well, you won't be alone. So that's part of it. But now this guy is like, I know where to get to the business. He's like hungry to go out and get more business. And he's creating problems for his organization to solve. So
because they got to produce more now.
Well, he's bringing other customers for products that they've never done before.
Oh.
And it means new skills, new competencies, new processes, new machinery. It's creating problems.
So, but what made him do it? Just because the board now says, what happened? Why did he end up agreeing to do it?
Well, it's his company, so it's not a matter of him agreeing, right? So, because he could have said, no, I'm not doing this,
It would have been bye-bye, possibly.
Right, he would have told me, get away, I don't want to do this, right?
Wow,
so
that's wild.
So it's like, all right, so we really have to sit down and have some conversations about what would hold you back. And when the opportunity comes, he's prepared to walk right through the door, as opposed to saying, well, I don't know if I can do it, or maybe not. It's like, and then you figure, the company may be saying, hey, we don't do this kind of thing. Why are you bringing this?
And so how did he must have been pretty happy by the end of all this. And the company, a year later, said...
Oh, of course, they're happy.
They're doing business.
They're doing business that they've never done before. And the other thing was, the company's growing. They had this plant in Brooklyn that was really lying dormant. If you went there in the daytime, there was no activity. At night, they made this one kind of product, and the facility itself was losing money. It was negative. It was like a losing asset. Now it's profitable. The facility, you go there, the place is just hopping.
There you go, 24/7.
It's
Get it going.
hopping. It's unbelievable. Yeah.
Beautiful. So how do people get in touch with you?
So they can call me at 888-471-3660. I have an email address that's santos@turnaroundip.com. And IP is like intellectual property. All right. And if you want to look at my blog, boy, do I ever look it up? It's turnaround.blogspot.com. And you'll find there videos, and you'll find articles where I talk about leadership, like the difference between management and leadership, some of the problems that people encounter, even just personally. How do you transform, go through transformation? Or I talk about transforming corporate culture. So I write quite a few articles about leadership and transformation and challenges that people find themselves in.
What's good news for you in any aspect of your life?
Good news for me is finding a problem that I don't know how to solve.
Interesting. Interesting.
And working through it.
Wow. All right. Last question. That's that's what keeps you moving forwards, obviously. Sure. That keeps keeping your mind open for those problems. Sure. And our challenges as you so take them to learn more and grow. That's beautiful. Last question, because we're very involved with World Peace and the International Day of Peace, September 21st. So I've asked many, many people, what does peace mean to them? So Ted Santos, what does peace mean to you?
My answer may be counterintuitive, but I would say that sort of like the 2-year-old that doesn't know how to tie their shoe, there are situations that people encounter with one another, and oftentimes it's not a problem. So we end up with wars and fights, and we end up with all kinds of physical abuse. If people learned how to handle whatever's happening or occurring in front of them, I say that we'd have a lot less strife in the world. So it's not so much looking for peace that I can just sit here and nothing's happening. So it's not chaos that's the problem. It's how you deal with what's occurring. So if you say tying my shoe is chaotic, that's only because you said so. So you're dealing with one problem that may be a big deal when you're 20, but when you're 30, you look back and say, wow, I can't believe I was so stressed out over that. So if we could train people to sort of peel away the minefields that we have in our own minds, I'd say we'd have a lot less problem and people would be much more effective in the way they interact with one another.
Ted Santos, thank you very much for sharing good news with us.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you.
Appreciate it.